Hello, everybody. My name is Gilda Ross. I'm the Glenbard Student and Community Projects Coordinator. I'm so excited that you could be here with us today in this beautiful studio at the College of DuPage. Special opportunity. Dr. Ali Mattu is here by special request from the Psychology Department of the professors here at the College of DuPage. We thank our sponsors who make this all possible. Most of all, we thank you for the gift of your time. Very quickly, before I begin, I just want to let you know about some of the amazing upcoming programs that we have. On Wednesday next week, we'll be welcoming by Zoom Michelle Zauner. She is the author of the book Crying in H Mart. It is her memoir. She is the lead singer of the group Japanese Breakfast. She'll be in conversation with Kelly Corrigan, and she has written a book. She's a PBS host, and the title of her book is Tell Me More. Should be a great conversation for teens and their parents as well. Then on Thursday, the 19th, we will be back on the campus of the College of DuPage welcoming Chris Herron. Chris Herron is a former NBA basketball star who will talk about his journey into recovery, very inspirational for teens and adults again. That will also be available as a Zoom. That is at 7 p.m. only. The week following, you won't want to miss Dr. Andrew Solomon. His book, which is titled Far from the Tree, was chosen by the New York Times as one of the 100 best books of the 21st century. It's again, an inspirational story about love, unconditional love of parents and children. So you don't want to miss that. September concludes when we welcome Ned Hallowell, Driven to Distraction. He will talk all about ADD and the opportunities with ADD. And then in September, we begin with Jeff Salingo, Who Gets In and Why. You can see the breadth of offerings. Please follow us on social media. That's our ask. And let people know that we're here. We are here for your neighbors and for family members across the country. Everyone's always welcome. Without further ado, we're going to get started. And it is my honor to introduce to you Jennifer McIntosh. She is the Associate Dean of the Library here at the College of DuPage. She will do the introductions. Jennifer?
Thank you, Gilda. It's so nice to be here, and it's so nice to be with all of you today. Again, I'm the Associate Dean of the Library at College of DuPage. I'm also a Glenbard parent, so I feel like really glad to be a part of this event today. The COD Library is really proud to be a sponsor, really be a supporter of the Glenbard Parent Series. And so if you're ever on the college campus, I really encourage you to stop by the library and check out the display that we keep featured in the lobby with titles that have been written by authors that are featured in the series. And if that doesn't work, you can also just come onto our library website, look at the Glenbard Parent Guide, where we have links to those titles for review. And you can also find links to titles that we've selected in an ebook format. Those books are available for checkout to all members of people who live in district, work in District 502, as well as people who study and work at the College of DuPage. Clinical psychologist Dr. Ali Mattu spent 10 years at New York City's best hospitals, treating hundreds of patients with anxiety disorders. Frustrated by mental health healthcare, he left Columbia University to focus on creating media for those unable to access quality mental health information. Now, his YouTube channel has grown to over 300,000 subscribers. He created Good at Anxiety to more deeply explore how anxiety works and what to do about it. Dr. Ali is an expert in treating anxiety disorders, obsessive compulsive disorders, and body-focused repetitive behavior disorders using cognitive behavioral therapy. He was an assistant professor at Columbia University Irving Medical Center and the director of mental health at Loop, a startup dedicated to social anxiety. Dr. Lee has been interviewed by the New York Times, appeared on CBS and NBC, and served on the board of directors of the American Psychological Association. And we are delighted to welcome him to GPS today. Dr. Ali.
What a lovely introduction. Thank you for that. I feel so honored looking at that September lineup. There are so many fantastic folks coming, and I just feel really honored for that. I think I need to start following GPS on social media so I can stay up to date on those talks, because you have so many wonderful talks coming this September. Andrew Solomon in particular is a former colleague when I was at Columbia, and you don't want to miss what he has to say. So today we're going to be talking about anxiety, and I want to share with you 4 life-changing lessons that I've learned about anxiety from over 10,000 hours of treating this problem. This is something that's very near and dear to my life. Anxiety's been a big part of my story and about everything I do. And what we're going to do is we're going to take just a few breaks while we're doing this talk to dive into some of the questions that are coming in. So please do keep your questions coming in because we're going to be tackling those as we move through this. So I have spent my entire career focusing on anxiety and treating anxiety problems. And from treating anxiety, what I've learned is it all boils down to 3 specific things. These are 3 things that I see coming up over and over and over again, whether I'm working with a child, a teenager, a young adult, an adult. Uh, it's this three problems that keep surfacing. Number one is isolation. People feel deeply isolated, not only in the environment they're in, but also in the feelings of anxiety that they have. Number two are limitations. The more isolated you become in anxiety, the more it starts to limit what you can do, who you can be. And then number 3 is avoidance. As you start to feel more limited in your abilities, things start to shrink and your life becomes smaller. Here's how some of the people I've worked with have described this problem. For isolation, I'm tired all the time. Being in an intensely uncomfortable state during almost every waking moment is draining me. For limitations, I keep walking away from the stuff that's important. And for avoidance, I feel like I have a small life. And these are 3 ideas we're going to keep coming back to in this time that we have together: isolation, limitations, and avoidance. I also keep hearing the same 3 desires from everyone I work with, particularly the very first meeting we have. They tell me, Dr. Ellie, I want to stop this. Just stop it. Make it go away. Get it out. I don't want this anymore. Get rid of this feeling. I just want to be normal again. I hear that a lot. And I completely get it. Anxiety used to hold me back too. I want to take you back to 1993, and I want to take you to San Jose, California, my hometown, where I was growing up, now more commonly known as Silicon Valley, but back then no one really called it that. It was a sleepy suburb, and I am in the 4th grade, and I am attending a Star Trek convention, my very first Star Trek convention. I've attended so many in my lifetime, but this first one really, really sticks out in my mind. Leonard Nimoy, the actor who played Spock, is appearing on stage, and there's a mass of people around me. That would feels like thousands of people. Maybe it was hundreds. Who knows? I'm a little kid. It feels like this rock concert, and the crowd is yelling, "Leonard Nimoy, Leonard Nimoy," and he appears on stage, and people erupt. There's roar, applause. And I am not seeing any of it. I don't see any of it. I took off my glasses and put them in my pocket because I was so afraid that people would think I'm weird at a Star Trek convention that I did not want to be seen as a Four Eyes. Now, what was going on here? Uh, at school, I was made fun of. At school, I always felt weird and strange. Aladdin had just came out, so everyone would call me Prince Ali, and I would run away in tears when that would happen, which made those kids do it only more. It was the 90s, a little bit different time. We weren't as on top of these things as we try to be now. But at school, I always felt like the loser, the weirdo, the last one picked for sports. Star Trek was the one place where I felt like I had hope, and I felt like there was a future where people like me, people who felt different, could belong. And Mr. Spock was a character that represented all of that. But here I was at this place where I was supposed to find my people, make my friends, have this connection, see my childhood hero. But because of my anxiety, I didn't. I never saw him. He was just this blurry image on that stage. And I left that convention feeling so ashamed. I felt so terrible. Um, I had adapted to my anxiety by becoming invisible, but what I so wanted was to be seen. And I couldn't do that because of my anxiety. I like to think of myself as going into stealth mode when I am socially anxious. And some of you might be familiar with that term, some of you might not. For the Trekkies out there, it's like a Klingon bird of prey that's going into cloak and disappearing. That's all I want to do. And for me, stealth mode, I thought I was disappearing and I thought no one could see me, but I was this tall brown kid that always stuck out in every situation I was in. I always stuck out, but I tried so much to be invisible, and it just never worked. So I want you to think about this. Do you have a blurry Spock moment in your life? What it looks like for some of the people I've worked with, it looks like the 35-year-old finance worker who could not speak up in a meeting because he was so terrified that people would judge what he has to say. Incredibly charismatic, successful in all areas of his life, but so worried that people would judge him if he shared his real perspectives. So he just didn't. It looks like the 20-year-old college student who is so overwhelmed from their classes, but can't ask for help because they are trying to do things perfectly, get everything just right. And they're afraid that if they ask for help, that people might start to see that they don't actually have everything together. And it looks like the 27-year-old young adult who graduated college, doesn't know what they're doing, and moved back in with their parents and feels like they're a total failure, even though their life is just getting started. I've thought about this blurry Spock moment a lot in my life. And what I have realized is it represents all the problems of anxiety. Because what anxiety does is it robs you of the present moment. It turns your attention inward on this internal universe. All the thoughts that people are going to think, I'm so weird, strange. People are going to think I'm a failure, that I might mess this up, that don't make this mistake. Things are going to go wrong. It turns to the internal sensations you have, your heart racing, how much you're sweating, which is a thing I'm doing right now. This is why I always wear dark colored shirts every time I give a presentation, because that way you can't see the sweat inside. But it turns to the sweat, the churning in your stomach, the heat that you're experiencing. All the attention goes inward on this internal universe, robbing you of everything that's happening in the external world. That's the problem with anxiety. And what I've come to realize that anxiety is not actually an emotional problem. I know you want to get rid of this emotion. I know you want to feel normal again. I know you want it to stop. We can't really do those things. Anxiety is an attention problem. It hijacks your attention. It sabotages your attentional process. It turns all your attention in, which is what keeps you stuck in life. And this is what we found in some of the newest treatments for anxiety, from acceptance and commitment therapy to the inhibitory learning model to metacognitive theory. All of what these treatments do is try to refocus your attention process. And I think this changes everything because while you can't stop an emotion, you can change an attention process. And that's what we're going to be talking about for the remainder of this talk. I want to help you not to beat anxiety because you can't. You can't beat an emotion. You can't stop an emotion. What I want to help you is to learn how to get good at it, to get good at anxiety. Now I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to check in to see if we have any questions coming in. Um,
Look different in a teenager and an adult.
it's a great question, and it's one I get a lot from parents. So the common stereotype that you probably have of anxiety is someone who is shaking, crying. They look like they don't want to be in that environment. And what I found working with people who have anxiety is no two people with anxiety look alike. They all look incredibly different, and it's a very personal presentation. And we're going to talk about that more in a moment. We can share some generalities across the age spectrum. So it is more common among kids to be experiencing anxiety in more of a physical way, that I don't feel good, my stomach hurts. You'll find that a lot with young kids, that they might say, I don't feel good, I feel sick, my tummy hurts. And the other thing that's much more common with children is the way in which anxiety can present itself around certain problems. It's much more common with kids to have a fear of the dark. It's much more common for kids to be afraid of costume characters. It's much more common for separation anxiety to come online around age 1, age 2. And then as kids become school age, it's much more common to kids to have big questions about death and dying and what happens afterwards, which, if you know the answer to that, let me know. I'm still trying to figure that one out. When kids become teenagers, most anxiety shifts towards social situations, relationships, that kind of stuff. And those tend to be the anxieties that stick with us for the rest of our lives. Now, that's what's developmentally normal and expected, are these types of anxieties. But when this stuff becomes a problem is when it starts to limit what you can do in life. And with young kids, it's going to present more as physical pains. With teenagers, you're always going to have mood and irritability and that sort of stuff. But the key to look for with kids, but also particularly teenagers, is this individual's abilities being limited relative to their peers? That's kind of what you want to look for. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in just a moment. But in general, kids, physical pains, and you probably are not going to see more of that cognitive worries, that kind of stuff, until they're a little bit older. Let me check in. Do we have any other questions? Yeah.
No. If my child's struggles are normal or not normal?
So how do I know if my child struggles are normal or not normal? Which is a good related question to the first one. Parents, and I say this as a parent of two kids. I have a 7-year-old and I have a 2-year-old. Parents are in general pretty bad at knowing if their child is struggling with anxiety. Now, why might that be? We're a bit too close to the problem. Anxiety can so often be invisible. It can be a force that is very hard to see. The suffering can be so invisible. So parents have a hard time knowing, um, is this normal anxiety, or is this more of a problematic anxiety? Is this an anxiety disorder? And so what you really want to do, if you have a school age child, is talk to your teachers. Talk to the teachers and ask them, how is my child doing relative to their peers? Are they trying to get out of situations? What are they like at lunchtime? Are they making friends? Are they asking for a lot of reassurance? Do they seem pretty down after I drop them off at school? Are they only talking through a peer? Are they whispering to a peer, and then that person is then speaking up for them? So what's beautiful about teachers is they have a much broader perspective. They work with the entire classroom, and they're able to see what is a child's strengths and what might be some of their challenges. So I always tell parents that if you're worried about your child, the first stop should really be to a teacher and to get some outside perspective. The other thing that you want to look for is relative to their peers, relative to their friends. Does it feel like your child isn't able to do some of the things that their peers are able to do? So if you might find out that there's a lot of sleepovers happening and your child is very much avoidant of them. Okay, what's going on there? Are they having a hard time with separation? Are they having a hard time with worries? You might speak to some of your friends and find out that your child's, all the questions that they're asking, all the worries at night, those aren't things that are coming up for other kids. So as parents, our perspective is so narrow. We're so close to our kids. We love them. We see them every day, but that keeps us from seeing the wider perspective of what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses. So we'll take a few more questions in a little bit. I am sorry, but I tend to talk a lot, and I want to make sure we get through all the material here, and I don't shortchange you all. So I want to talk about the very first way you get good at anxiety, and in order to do that, I'm going to have to take you back again, this time later than no, around the same age, and I want to talk to you about the very first time I saw Jaws. I saw Jaws as a third or fourth grader. I know, not the best thing to see at that age. You know what? This is what happens when you have a brother that's 10 years older than you. You end up seeing things that you probably shouldn't see when you're a little kid. I saw the movie Jaws, and it terrified me. I also had seen other scary movies at the time. I saw Nightmare on Elm Street. I saw Friday the 13th. Those things didn't really do anything to me. Jaws did. It certainly did make me afraid to go in the water again. Because what happened to me right after seeing that movie, grew up in Northern California, and we had a bathtub that was just your normal bathtub. But I became afraid that a great white shark would come out of the drain and would eat me, bite me. And so I had the bright idea, hey, Ollie, here's what you're gonna do. Here's how you keep yourself from being eaten. I would stand on the ledges of the bathtub and I would kind of balance myself off so I don't fall down into the bathtub. But in doing so, what I found out is that is a very slippery, dicey situation. So I thought if I stand like that, I could jump away if a shark comes and keep myself safe. And I did this for about 2 years until one day I slipped and fell and hit my head. And my mom heard and said, "Are you okay?" And I told her what I was doing, and she said, "Ollie, what do you do? There's no ocean below the bathtub. There is ground. There's bathtub, drain, ground. There's no sharks coming out." So what was going on here? Well, even though I started to stand in the bathtub, the other thing I didn't do is I didn't go in the pool. I never really learned how to swim. And so this situation kind of represents how anxiety comes to be. I never chose to be afraid of sharks, it just happened. And a lot of times when we struggle with anxiety, it just sort of happens. Things come together in a way. Every now and then, there is some type of really incredible origin story that I'll hear from my patients. Most often, though, it just sort of happens. And why is that? Well, it's like most people are moving through life hearing the intro to the Mario Brothers game, do 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 do. It's fun, it's upbeat, you want to explore, it's great. That's what most people hear as they're moving through life. But when you struggle with anxiety, that's not the music you're hearing. What you're hearing is like that boss battle music when you're taking on Bowser that really like escalates your heart rate. You're just experiencing life very differently. I like to think about it as the volume on anxiety has been turned up for people. And one of the things that will turn up the volume on anxiety is genetics. This stuff runs in families, and I was wired for anxiety. Populations work best when there are diversities of temperaments out there. We need some anxious people in the population. We need people who are also thrill seekers and not anxious. And the world works best when we're all able to sort of mix up and figure out a way to connect with each other and work together in a team. And I did not know this when I was growing up, but I came from a long line of anxious people on my mom's side. My mom, to this day, I'm very fortunate. My mom is still alive, still with us. And only last year Mom's in her 70s. And only last year did I learn that my mom has a lifelong phobia of thunder and lightning, that she still experiences it to this day. So I was wired for anxiety, and I was also a kid that grew up in Northern California. I grew up about 25 minutes from the beach. So when I saw Jaws, it hit me differently than had I been growing up in Kansas. And the ocean was not really a thing I did every day. For me, it was personal. And I see this with all the people I work with. It just sort of happens. People are wired for anxiety, and something in their environment might turn up the dial on that anxiety even more. And for me, it was the fact that I was in California. Why does this happen automatically? Well, there's an amazing thing inside of us that determines how we learn information. Classical conditioning. You might remember this from a psychology class. Pavlov's dogs. They learned to salivate at the sound of a bell, and they learned that this meant that food is coming. Our body's always looking for associations. Our mind is an association machine. And the mind of me at that age connected water with sharks, and sharks equal death. So water equals death. This just happened. Anxiety and any problem that a child experiences is never the child's fault. It just sort of happened, and it just happened for me. Fear, stress, and anxiety. I want to just give you a brief explanation of the differences here. And fear, you're always going to get fear when you're in a situation where your life is in danger, you're doing something for the first time, you're doing something that you haven't done in a long time, or the stakes are high. So if there's a lion chasing you, fear. Your body completely changes to help you take on that situation. And in that situation, it's pumping muscle or pumping muscles to blood. Yeah, and that's what your body's doing. No, it's pumping blood to your muscles. You're starting to breathe quickly, so you take in more oxygen, your pupils dilate, you become razor sharp and you're focused. Everything is getting you ready to stay alive and get out of that situation. Same thing happens when you have a very important presentation you have to give for work. Fear is helping you focus. Stress is the same process at play when you have an important challenge coming up in the near future. Anxiety is when your mind imagines that something bad is going to happen, and it triggers that same stress fear response. It's imagining that something bad is going to happen. For me, it imagined that water and sharks equal death. And here's the thing about this. This is what one of my mentors, Dr. Charlie Mansueto, taught me. He said, anxiety is just nature's way. We avoid what scares us, and by avoiding it, we never learn how to handle it. I avoided going in the water. So what happened? I never learned how to swim. Now, what did that do for me? It made me even more scared of going in the water. It made my phobia even worse. This is where I want you to think about anxiety. Just a moment ago, we were talking a question about how do you see it? How do you recognize it? How is it different? And I said parents are very bad at identifying this. It's not just parents that are bad, but friends are bad. Partners are bad. Husbands, wives, we're terrible at seeing anxiety in other people. And the reason for that is anxiety sort of exists in the negative space. It's the stuff we don't see. Anxiety is all our thoughts and our feelings, that internal universe. No one else is aware of what's happening inside of us. It's all in this negative space. It's almost like for people who struggle with anxiety, that normal everyday situations are like walking across the street. For most of us, it's a simple task. We kind of need to look both ways, make sure there's no cars coming. But when you struggle with anxiety, that exact same task feels like you're walking on a tightrope. The stakes become high. The difficulty skyrockets, and it feels like life or death. That's what it feels like to do simple things when you struggle with an anxiety disorder. And if you struggle with this, you're not alone. Up to 33.7% of the population will experience an anxiety disorder in their lifetime. 33.7%, that's a third of the world, is going to experience anxiety at some point in their lifetime. And currently, about 4% of everybody is experiencing an anxiety disorder, which might not sound like a lot, but that's the entirety of the US population. If you look at everyone on the planet, the number of people who are struggling with anxiety is equivalent to everyone in America. This is the most common mental health problem we have out there in the world. So if you're struggling with this, you're not alone. This is a very common problem, but unfortunately, it's a very invisible problem. One of my big goals in life is I would love to retire from this whole field and be at a place where we're having conversations about anxiety in the same way that we're having conversations with our pediatricians about growth charts. Where's your child on the growth chart? How are they doing? And what I encourage everyone watching this to really think about is think about how is your child doing, not in terms of the developmental milestones of walking, talking, things like that, but the social emotional milestones of being able to get dropped off at school, being able to learn how to read. We look at that academic stuff, but do we also look at your child's ability to organize their own homework, know what they have to do, your child's ability to make a new friend, your child's ability to deal with a social conflict, to deal when that friendship might be ending or there's a conflict involved? Is your child able to ask for help when they're falling behind? Are they able to be assertive and say no when they don't want to do things? We need to start talking about developmental milestones, not only in terms of physical and growth and all of that, but social, emotional. And that's going to get us better at understanding when anxiety is coming up. Okay, I'm going to take a break here and check in again to see if we've got more questions. And it also gives me a chance to drink water because I am thirsty.
Get a lot of people coming to GPS because they know they're going to get the skills of what to
Mm-hmm.
do.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one particular question related to that. When my child goes to bed, I can see that they're anxious and they're ruminating. And can you help me help them with this issue?
So, yeah, this is, I would love to spend a whole hour talking about this. So the question here, my child at night is up with these worries. They're ruminating. What do I do in this situation? So it is, um, I would say it's pretty common with people who struggle with anxiety for them to have vulnerable times of the day. Some people I work with, it's all in the morning. They're getting up, they're getting ready, they're thinking about everything they have to do. And this could be kids, this could be teenagers, this could be adults. And then the opposite is true as well, is they might have a flood of worries at night. And I like that word ruminating. Ruminating kind of speaks to this idea of churning, thinking it over. Why did I do this? Why me? Did I do the right thing? Did I say the right thing? Did I make a mistake? Why did this happen to me? All of that kind of stuff. So we're going to talk about this in just a moment here, a little bit more into the thoughts piece. But one thing I want to say at this point is it's really, really important as much as you can, especially at nighttime, to have a consistent routine that helps you to calm your body, that helps you to focus and have some consistency over here, to have kind of a wind down routine. I do not. This is a I'm sure cell phones might come up in this conversation. Um, I learned this lesson in the pandemic, particularly, that if I expose myself to the news, to anything going on my phone at night, that it really triggers my anxiety and it gets these thoughts going in a way that is not helpful for me. Now, at the same time, for my wife, clearing out what she has to do in the morning, clearing out her schedule, checking in on things, it actually reduces her anxiety. So for her, being on her phone at night is incredibly helpful for her. And for my daughter, who has very much struggled with this, with the worries at night, her worries are often about, am I gonna have PE? Is PE tomorrow? Because the boys in her class are they'll uh, they might say things about whether she did a good job at kicking the ball or not, and this gets stuck in her head and she hates this. So what we do for her is we always have a clear wind down activity that relaxes her, that soothes her, whether it is singing, whether it is reading books, whether it is doing some drawing, whatever it might be. Find what works for you, and what works for you and your family and your child, your spouse, your partner. It might be different, and that's completely okay. As much as you can have consistent, predictable routines, that reduces anxiety right there. Anxiety thrives in uncertainty. Uncertainty is the fuel that keeps anxiety going. And if you can minimize uncertainty by having a consistent routine, and that routine soothes you, makes you feel good, makes you feel tired as well, those are the kind of things that are going to help with those really difficult night times that I know a lot of parents struggle with. I want to thinking about these thoughts. This is one of the most unpopular things that I say, but I'm still going to say it. What I have found about the worries that come out of anxiety is they are incredibly meaningless. And what I mean by that is when you struggle with anxiety, you tend to experience the same worries in the same situation over and over again. It's like as if you have a weather app that is telling you every single day that it's going to rain, there's going to be a thunderstorm, there's going to be a flood coming. So watch out. At some point, probably pretty soon, you would look at that and you say, this app is a piece of junk. It is in no way reflective of reality. But what happens with anxiety is we get so focused inward on that internal universe, right? That we don't see that this information doesn't fit what's actually happening. But we still continue believing those thoughts. We still continue to give them value. We still continue to give them meaning. We continue to ruminate on them. So these thoughts are really, really meaningless. They're the background noise of our mind. They're a byproduct of an emotion that is very important, an emotion that helps us to show up, be prepared, be ready for important events. But if you're struggling with this, if you're tuning in, or if you have a child or a loved one or friend or family member who struggles with anxiety, they just have too much of it. The volume is turned up and they're experiencing more of these thoughts. Just because they're having more of them doesn't mean they're more meaningful or more important. So the first thing we need to do here is find some way to get unstuck with these thoughts. And so I like to help everyone I work with to find a story to tell about their anxiety. I'm going to give you some of my favorite ones. And the reasons why I think this is so important is not only does it help us to get unstuck with the anxiety, but it also really helps other people to understand it. Because I guarantee you, your spouse, your child, the teacher you work with, no one understands your anxiety the way you do. No one sees it happen. It's very rare. Maybe the people that are closest to you might know when your anxiety is up and you're starting to act in a way that's difficult, but most people don't. So here's some. I'm going to give you some of my favorites. If you're someone who struggles with panic attacks, or you might experience agoraphobia, where it's very hard for you to leave situations where you feel stuck, or it's hard for you to be in situations where you feel stuck. Here's one that might work is a story where you can tell someone, you know what it's like when you're going on a big run or exercise, or you've done something that really got your heart racing. Maybe you had to move a couch and you feel really sore and overwhelmed and you're sweating and you're breathing really quickly. And the person will say, yeah, 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 I know what you're talking about. And then you say, imagine that feeling, but it comes out of nowhere. It just starts by itself. And imagine how scary that must be to start sweating, to feel hot, to feel muscle tension, to feel all of that physical stuff coming out of nowhere. And that's what it's like to have panic attacks. And that's what it's like to have agoraphobia, as all of those things come out of nowhere. Another one I like for agoraphobia, because this can be one that a lot of people have a hard time wrapping their head around, is you have a hard time being in an elevator, Going through tunnels, going over a bridge? I don't get it. Why is this difficult for you? It's hard for you to ride the L train? Like L train, right? Did I get that? Yeah. Yeah, there we go. We got BART in the Bay Area and we have the subway in New York. But if you have a hard time being in those enclosed spaces, it's kind of like being blindfolded and dropped in a maze. And now the blindfold's lifted and you're trying to figure out, where am I? This is not safe. I need to get out of here. And you're trying to climb and figure out what is the way that I can get out of here and get to safety. If you're someone who struggles with separation anxiety, where it's hard for you to be away from loved ones or be out of touch with loved ones. A lot of times I see that with texts. People need to be in touch with texts, and if they're not, does something bad happen to them? Are they in a car accident? Are they okay? What happened? Or if you're someone who experiences a phobia, you have a hard time with insects, you have a fear of heights, of needles, going to the dentist, stuff like that. Well, this is kind of like walking through life with binoculars on. You have a very narrow view of the world, and certain details are magnified. My mother-in-law has a terrible fear of dogs, and for her, every dog, it could be a little tiny, cute Havanese, beautiful pup, all it wants to do is just sit and lick you. But she sees it and her mind completely focuses on the dog's teeth. This dog is unpredictable. This dog's going to jump on me. It's going to bite me and something bad is going to happen. It's like looking at life through binoculars. It's a narrow view. You're not getting the wide view and you're focusing in on very small details. Selective mutism, if you don't talk in certain situations. This was me as a kid. They put me in ESL in kindergarten because they thought I didn't know how to speak English. I knew how to speak English. I was anxious and I didn't speak up. It took me out of ESL when they learned that I realized that a couple of teachers were making fun of one of the students, and then they did not put me in ESL again. Again, school in the 80s, very different time. So if you have selective mutism or social anxiety where you feel like you're a weird, strange, different, odd, things like that, it's like going into a social situation and everyone else has X-ray vision. They see, you feel like they see straight through you. You feel so exposed. You feel like you're completely put on the spot. The spotlight is completely on you. And if you have generalized anxiety or obsessive compulsive disorder, this is where uncertainty is really the most difficult thing. And you might have worries about the future or doubts about the past. And if you did something wrong, or if you might be causing harm to other people, or something bad might happen in the future. This is like walking through the woods. It's foggy. You're not quite sure what's happening in front of you. You're not quite sure what's behind you. And you know something bad is coming, but you're not quite sure where it is. That's what it's like to have OCD and GAD. So the very first way that we get good at anxiety is to get out of your internal universe, to find these ways, to tell these stories, to see that, oh, these thoughts keep coming up. It's the same thought over and over again. Dr. Ellie said that actually doesn't mean anything if that's happening, that I shouldn't be giving this more attention. Finding ways to shift your focus from what's happening here to what's happening out there. Okay, let me take a break and just check in to see if we have another question. Yeah.
Just find the story.
Yeah.
And then tell others. So say it out loud. And are you saying that by telling others, I'm sort of also telling myself?
Yeah. Yeah, there's two reasons for that. One is we want, so by telling others, am I also telling myself is the question here. Um, Anything that helps you to get unstuck with these thoughts and these internal sensations is good. And oftentimes, if you're able to say, oh, you know what? That thing is happening again. Working with my own therapist, I labeled this my Ferris Bueller brain. This idea that everything's going to be fine, don't worry about it, have fun, procrastinate, avoid, don't worry about it. It's going to be okay. Once I had a name for this problem, I was able to pick up on when it's happening and realize, oh, that's my anxiety again. Oh, that's my anxiety again. There's two ways in which I still experience social anxiety to this day. One is when I have to ask a question in a large group environment, my heart starts to race. And then as a child, I was terrified of that. That made me feel like something's wrong, don't do it, don't ask. Now I know when my heart's racing, that's my anxiety. Oh, that's my anxiety. I remember that story that this is what's going on. Okay, I know the moment I ask this question, my heart stops racing so fast, or at least my attention shifts out. I get less focused on it. So that's what I need to do in this situation. My heart's racing. I'm anxious. That means I should really ask this question because it's really important to me. So number one, it gets you unstuck with that experience. And number two, finding that story of your anxiety is critical to getting help with this problem. And I don't necessarily mean professional help. I mean help from parents, from friends, from family members, from teachers. No one knows you're struggling with this until you're able to communicate it in a way that other people understand. All right. Another story I want to tell you is about the time where the time when I was a freshman in high school and I got peed on. Okay, I was taking Latin. I was taking Latin 1 because I thought I was going to become a physician. Became a psychologist, close-ish, I guess. But I thought Latin would really help me with all the medications and all that sort of stuff. And names of body parts and dura mater. I still remember that. So maybe 4 years of Latin paid off for something. I got something out of it. But next to me in Latin class was this Swedish exchange student who reminded me of Kramer from Seinfeld. Very much kind of looked like that. And one day, I was in the bathroom right after lunch, and I had this giant soda, and I really needed to go. And so I was using the urinal. Now, if you're not familiar with a urinal, it's like a toilet that's on the wall that you can pee into. So I was standing near a urinal, peeing into it. And usually, urinal code is if there's a bunch of urinals open, you don't go and stand right next to the person if there's a bunch of other ones. And I knew something's wrong because Swedish Kramer walked in and stood right next to me. And then he started, I saw the stream of pee come onto my foot, and he started saying, "Ollie, we're really good friends, right?" And I was frozen, completely panicking. And then I was thinking, is this what they do in Sweden? That this is like a friendship ritual? I've been assured by Swedish people that it's not. Um, and I couldn't pee anymore. I zipped up and I ran away. That feeling of wetness in my shoe, I still remember it. It feels terrible, gross. Why am I telling you this story? Well, number one, I started avoiding using urinals after that. I had to use a stall. And even then, it was very difficult for me to use a public bathroom when there was other people nearby. I'd go in the stall and kind of wait a while until people cleared out. Again, no one knew this was going on. People just thought, wow, Ali spends a lot of time in the bathroom. I hope he's okay. I wonder if he has GI problems. It was all anxiety. And this is also one of the things that anxiety does. Anxiety shuts certain things down because it's putting a focus on helping you overcome an immediate problem, which it thinks is a lion or an important social situation or an important project. But in this situation, anxiety was shutting me down, and you cannot pee or poop when you are super anxious. And your anxiety also shuts down your digestive system. It's not important. It's not a life or death situation if you're digesting your food, which is why we get all these stomach troubles when we're anxious. It also shuts down your immune system, which is why so many students get colds around finals because they're so anxious about it. So this was fine. I kept doing this. I kept avoiding public restrooms until I was in graduate school getting my PhD in clinical psychology. And what happened is a patient of mine, I was learning how to treat anxiety. I was learning how to treat obsessive compulsive disorder. And I had a patient who had a big fear of using public restrooms. So we did a variety of stuff. And one day he came in and he said, Ali, I think we've overcome all the problems I have, except for using urinals. And so I think you've taught me so much stuff, Ali. All I need to do is I need to practice what you've taught me in a urinal. So the most helpful thing would be if we could go to a public restroom and we could use a urinal together. You actually pee for real life over there, and I'll be over here, and I'm just gonna deal with the anxiety of maybe I'm getting splashed on. And you know what? I'm gonna practice everything Ali taught me. I can get through this. And I said, okay, great, yeah. Tom, we can do that. Sure. Um, when do you want to set your next appointment? And he's like, well, I can't come in next week. And I'm like, thank God. How about in 2 weeks? So I had 15 days, 15 days to figure out how to overcome this massive anxiety I had. So what did I do? I tried every single coping skill that I knew in that moment. And here's where I want to tell you something about coping skills. A true coping skill is not necessarily something that helps you to feel better. A true coping skill helps you to be in the situation you want to be in and to be flexible in that situation. If a coping skill is just making you feel better, it might not work. Real coping is about being in the situations you want to be in. So the first thing I did actually is I was talking to my colleague. I was too anxious. See, the research is me search, and so I was too anxious to tell my supervisor about all of this because I wanted to be a good student. I wanted to show my supervisors that I can help my patients when I should have asked for help. Um, if I did, my supervisor would have said, okay, well, there's a lot of opportunities for us to work through the situation. We can do self-disclosure, we can do this, we can do that, blah, blah, blah. Don't just try to like tough your way through it. But that's what I did because I was anxious about it. So the first thing I did is I tried to understand the impact, where I actually sat down for 20 minutes and I wrote down how that event of being peed on had impacted my life. And I'd never really done that before. So often we get stuck in these worries, and I want to help you to get unstuck, less focus on the internal universe. And when you're ruminating and dealing with these worries, one of the things you can do is you can start writing about it and understanding the impact. And once you do that, you're shifting your focus forward. You're not getting stuck here, you're shifting your focus forward. So I spent 20 minutes to just write down how this event had impacted my life. And what I started to realize is it really made me feel like less of a man. It made me feel less safe. It made me feel less secure. It made me feel like I was weak. So for me, just the idea of using a urinal, it wasn't just about this one event that happened, but it's about all of these things. And once I understood the impact, I was able to start thinking, okay, what do I do now moving forward? You can do this too. If you're stuck on these worries, spend about 3-4 nights writing for 20 minutes about them. The same thing, do it for about 3 to 4 nights, and you'll start to feel the same kind of movement where you're focused less here and you can start to focus a little bit more moving forward. That was helpful. Then I tried a very tried and true coping skill called 5-4-3-2-1. This is a coping skill where you look at 5 different things in the environment. You then touch 4 different textures: my shirt, my skin, my jeans, the surface right over here, the microphone. You notice the feeling of it, the temperature, all of that. You listen to 3 different sounds in the environment. If I was doing this here, I would hear the hum of the air conditioning, the echo of my voice, the clearing of the throat, this kind of stuff. You notice 2 different smells. Right now, for me, it's going to be the lotion on my hands, and I'm struggling to find another one. But in that struggle, your attention gets less focused on the internal universe and more focused here. And then the last one is you notice the taste in your mouth, which for me is actually a little bit of dry mouth right now, which means I need to get a little bit more of this. This skill didn't help me at all with my urinal phobia, with my peeing phobia. I don't know about you, but most of the time, this skill is all about getting grounded in the environment you're in. Less focus on the internal universe, more grounded in what's happening here. I don't know about you, but most of the time, I don't want to get grounded in all the sensations in the public restroom. It just not pleasant stuff. The more I tried this, the more it felt gross, and the more it also felt like I'm smelling pee and I know I'm not going to be able to produce any pee, which then triggered all those fears again. So grounding, it didn't work for me in this situation. It's worked elsewhere, hasn't worked for me here. Another skill I tried is something called progressive muscle relaxation. We can do this right now. Is you take your hand, if you are physically able to do so and you don't have any injuries or arthritis or anything like that going on right now, you take your hand, you imagine that you have a lemon in this hand. And then what you do is imagine you're squeezing that lemon, squeeze that lemon, hold on to that tension, hold it, hold it. You holding it? I see you. You're not holding it. You're holding it over there. And then let go of it, and notice how different your hand feels right now. I did this with a patient once, and they said, "I don't need to go to the spa anymore because this is just as good as going to the spa." And I said, "Hold on now, let's not go that far. Still need my massage time." But if you just look up progressive muscle relaxation, there are millions of ways of doing this for kids, for teens, for adults. There's so many ways of doing this, and you can do this with all the different muscle groups in your body. And what it does is you're activating more of that relaxation response that sort of undoes anxiety. This is a skill I do all the time when I'm in meetings. I do this with my legs. I tense a lot of the leg muscles and I let go. No one knows I'm doing it. Super helpful for me in those social situations. Did not help me with peeing at all. It did not help me in that situation at all. It felt really strange and awkward to do that before I had to use the urinal, and it didn't really fit. Another skill, the dive reflex. This, I think, is one of the most beautiful things in on this planet. Every vertebrae shares this experience. When anyone who has a backbone, any animal, including us, thinks it's diving into water, the parasympathetic nervous system gets activated. This is the part of the body that undoes anxiety. It calms you down. It slows breathing. It relaxes muscles. It's that sort of sensation that we all get. It's very easy to trigger this. All you have to do is fool your body into thinking you're diving into water. How do you do that? I've got a video on this on my YouTube channel. You can check it out. But all you do is you want this area, this sort of ski mask area, you want it submerged in water for about 15 to 30 seconds. And you just hold your breath. You do that and your body thinks you're diving into water, and it lowers your heart rate. You can do a heart rate monitor and you'll see it just by itself it's going down. Now if you have a heart condition, you want to talk to your physician about this beforehand because this will reduce your heart rate pretty quickly. But for people who experience real intense anxiety that goes up really quickly, sometimes this is the only thing that works. It didn't work for me with my urinal phobia. It did not work at all because it was super weird to do in that situation. I can't use it's a public restroom problem, and I'm not going to use the sink over there, go like this, and then try to pee, and then my face is all wet. It looks like did the guy pee on himself? What's going on over there? It didn't work in that situation. Another thing I tried is to completely change give my nervous system a shock. I would eat Sour Patch Kids right before, try to pee, didn't work. This is something that has helped a lot of my patients, especially peppermint. Having peppermint can kind of shock your body and change your feeling. Didn't work in this situation. I tried looking at funny cat videos on YouTube beforehand to give myself a bit of a positive boost. I do that a lot with other situations that make me anxious. It didn't help here. The thing that helped me was the last thing I tried. And the thing that I am most dubious about in most anxiety situations, and that was deep breathing. What I did was box breathing, where I took a breath in for 4 seconds, held it for 4 seconds, exhaled for 4 seconds. And then I kept doing that. I feel different just doing that right now. Maybe I sound different too. I slowed my breathing. And as I did that, it took about a minute. But after about a minute, drip, drip. I was so happy. I was so happy that I could pee. And there was people coming in and out. I remember that first time I was doing this. And I just said, okay, Ellie, just focus on your breath. I felt my body loosen up a bit, the muscles loosen up. And when it came time to help my patient, that's exactly what I did. And I remember him telling me afterwards, as we were debriefing with that exercise, he said, my favorite part about it, Ali, is it actually took you a while to pee. And I wasn't sure. It triggered my anxiety in a good way where I was like, is he peeing? Is he not peeing? What's going on? Is he doing this on purpose? And he's like, did you do that on purpose? And I'm like, yeah, totally. That was all completely planned. It wasn't. I was terrified. This is the thing. The reason I'm sharing this lesson with you. People ask me, what skills? What do I do? How do I do it? I don't know what's going to work for you. And I don't know what's going to work for you in this situation at this point in your life. It always changes. Anxiety can sometimes feel like this vicious cycle. I'm not getting enough sleep. I'm not eating well. I'm up with these worries. All the kids at school, all this stuff is happening. It feels like a vicious cycle and it feels overwhelming. And my reaction to that is this is a good thing because each point in this vicious cycle is a point for us to intervene. Each of these different points, there are different skills we can try to help you with this situation. And we don't know until we experiment what is going to change everything. And sometimes all it takes is one thing that we just shift a little bit and it breaks that entire cycle apart. So I don't know what's going to work for you. I didn't even know what was going to work for me. And I was becoming an anxiety expert. But you have to try, you have to experiment, and you have to see what happens. This is the second lesson I've learned about anxiety. To get good at anxiety, not only do you have to get out of your internal universe, you have to find some way to focus on the present, to get back to the present moment. And that's what real coping is. It's about a skill that helps you to be in the present situation, whatever that might be. Maybe being in the present situation is getting out of your thoughts so you can fall asleep. Maybe it's about standing in front of a urinal and being able to pee. You have to experiment and to see what's going to work from there. Before I get into my last story and the last lesson I want to share with you, I want to check in to see if we have any questions again. Mm-hmm. I think the very first thing all of us can do is find the words to understand our anxiety and to be able to share it with other people. That is the very first thing. And if you're a parent, the very first thing might be to understand how is my child doing relative to their peers. We all live in different environments. We all come from different families, different cultures. We all have different expectations. But as best as you can figure out relative to the peers, whether your child is in daycare, whether they are in high school, whether they're in college, relative to their peers, how are they doing? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? That's a good starting point. And if your child has a hard time, if you know they're struggling and they have a hard time talking about their anxiety, think about, are there other characters in the video games they play, in the shows they watch, in the books they read, in the music they listen to that they identify with? Are there lyrics that stick out that best explain what this experience is like? Because once you can find out if this is a problem and you can name it, you can find a way of describing it, then you can start changing it. then you can see when it's coming up, and then all of a sudden you'll start to realize, oh, this is coming up here and there and there and there. And as a parent, you might say, oh, I had no idea you're going through that. And this does this always happen in this situation? Talk, listen, understand, and create a collaborative shared understanding of what this anxiety is, what it looks like, what it feels like, and when it's coming up. So I want to go back to that idea of me being the stealth mode kid trying to disappear into the crowd. And when I got to high school, one of the first classes I took was public speaking. Why would a socially anxious kid take public speaking? I thought it was a class where we would study famous public speeches. So when the first day of class I showed up and Miss Georgiana Hayes said, "Welcome public speaking, where you can face your fear of public speaking," I freaked out. I went to the main office and I asked the guidance advisor, "How do I drop this class?" And she said, "Very easy, Ollie. Take this piece of paper back to Miss Hayes, tell her you want to drop it, get her signature, you're out. We'll put you in something really easy. Don't worry about it." Well, I was too socially anxious to ask Miss Hayes to drop the class. That was terrifying. Asking her, I'm gonna not take your class anymore. No, I was terrified of that. So I did what every anxious person does, which is you tell yourself, I'll figure out some way out of this. I'm sure I can take public speaking and never do a speech. I'm sure that can happen. There's a kid in that class. I call him my Zach Morris. For those of you who watch Saved by the Bell, he was the cool kid in school. Always had that cool giant telephone, had the cool sweaters, had the cool hair. For those of you who might be a little bit younger, he was like a Timothy Chalamet. Everyone wanted to hang out with this kid. He was cool. He had that vibe, right? Well, the very first assignment we had in public speaking was to give a short speech where we are sitting next to each other with one other person. And I got paired up with Zach Morris, with Timothy Chalamet, and I was terrified. I got paired up with this cool upperclassman, and we had to give a 1 to 2 minute talk on a topic we know very well. And then we had to debrief afterwards. He went first and he killed it. This guy nailed it. He was charming, charismatic. I was on the edge of my seat. I was just excited to be breathing the same airspace as him. I was glued to every word. And as soon as he finished, his face dropped. His voice changed. And when we had to process what happened, he said, I thought you were so completely bored, Ali, by everything I was saying. I thought my words aren't making sense. I'm mumbling. I was sweating, and I felt like you could hear it, you could see it. It was terrifying. I was completely blown away. This cool kid was reflecting back every word, every worry I had about myself, about how I come across. And his worries, the anxiety he had, this mind reading imagination about what I was actually thinking, did not fit the facts at all. He did fantastic, but he thought he did terrible. And he thought I was bored when I was on the edge of my seat. I walked away from that class thinking, wait a minute. If this is something that he's thinking, is this something other people are thinking as well? And as the class went on, I found that it was those same worries. We all had these worries, no matter how we actually performed. These are the worries that most people had. Completely changed my life. It completely changed everything. Not only did I love that class, I went on to do speech and debate, and I continued teaching, and I do stuff like this. I love this, and the whole purpose of my life, I think, is to help other people have those 5-second moments of change, get people to a place where they're able to learn what they need to learn to move forward. And this is what I've discovered about anxiety is your mind is more like a garden where anxiety, it grows all these weeds and they naturally grow. Without us doing anything, these weeds keep coming back, and we try to pull them out. We try to get rid of them, but you can't. You can't get rid of an emotion. It's going to come. It's going to be there. There's nothing you can do about it. But what we can do is we can gain new experiences. And when we do that, it's sort of like planting a flower and cultivating that flower and having that flower grow and overshadow all those weeds. And hopefully, if you get enough of those experiences, you plant enough of those weeds kind of they're there, but no one really sees them. They don't bother us because what we're actually seeing are these beautiful plants, these beautiful flowers that we have planted. You can't think your way out of anxiety. It's impossible. What we can do is we can gain new experiences that help us to have a more realistic view of what's actually happening out there in the world. Um, this is the last lesson about getting good at anxiety. It's about getting out of your internal universe, being able to focus on the present, and then living by what your senses reveal. Living by what your senses reveal. Living by what our eyes and our ears are teaching us about the world. Not living in this internal universe by what our worries are telling us, but gaining experiences that give us real contact with the things we fear. I've I've treated so many different types of anxieties, from fear of spiders to a fear of heights and everything in between. And the common thread I see among all of that is we have these predictions that never really match up with reality. People who have a fear of spiders fear that the spider is going to crawl onto them, bite them, and then something bad is going to happen. When in reality, spiders are usually as scared of us as we are of them. They want to walk away, and they freeze. They don't want us going anywhere near them. But of course, it makes sense if you have a fear of spiders that you would stay away from them. You would never learn this lesson. Everything I try to do and what I help the parents I work with is to arm them with the skills that can help their kids be in these difficult situations and then learn from them. Really focus on what they struggle with and gain real world information about what actually happens. I don't really think of myself as a stealth mode kid anymore, even though I'm still that sweaty, scared child. I think of myself more as this stealth mode insider, that I've been through this experience. I understand it. I'm not afraid of it. I'm going to help other people to understand it. And that's what I'm hoping you can become in your families, is an insider that can help people to understand what anxiety is, how it's experienced in your family, and what are some things you can actually do about it. These are the lessons I want to leave you with. Anxiety is an emotion. It's not an emotion problem. Anxiety is an attention problem. I want you to get out of your universe and find a way to focus on the present moment, experiment, try, see what works, and live by what your senses reveal, not what your mind imagines. I know we just scratched the surface here. So if you want to learn more, go to goodatanxiety.com. I've got a free course that I'm going to be releasing later this month that dives into all these skills in way more detail and has a lot more. Before we wrap up, let me see if we have any last questions.
So much good here. Here's my last question. You've been doing this for a while. What's different now than
Mm.
years ago?
This is a terrible last question because I want to spend hours talking about it, but it is probably the question I get most. Some version of this is the question, the topic that this leads to is the question I get most. Um, it it's it's both not changed. How have things changed now is what this question is getting at, and based on my experience treating anxiety. And in some ways it hasn't changed at all. The process of treating anxiety is the same. It is these same things of getting out of your internal universe, learning to focus on the present, and then taking in information from your senses, not your worries, right? That is the same. The challenge and the way it presents itself is completely different. What I see has really gone up is challenges in social situations, worries about perfectionism and failure, being behind. I'm not good enough. I'm not doing things the right way. And the biggest challenge I really see is related to anxiety is this challenge of like loneliness and of social connection. I think there's a piece here where phones and social media are connected to this problem, but they don't also define it completely. We're in a very strange time where the way we're interacting with each other is completely reinventing itself. And it has been for the last 10 to 15 years, whether that is social media, whether that is remote work, the world, the way we interact, this, whether it's this, just the ability that I have to talk to all of you here when you're at home is fantastic. I know you're busy. I know you spent all day doing all these different things that you have to do, and now you have to do all the family stuff. And then hopefully, maybe kids will fall asleep and you can actually have some time tonight to yourself, or that's time where you try to get ahead on your work or the stuff that you're falling behind on, right? The fact that we can have this conversation when you're at home or in your car or at work is phenomenal. It's also transforming everything. And think about our kids. They're growing up with these fantastic ways of interacting with each other. But they're hanging out, I used to hang out at the mall and go to Hot Topic, and now kids are hanging out on TikTok and having comments. And my parents couldn't see me hanging out with my friends, but we we comment on TikTok and we judge and say all these things. So it's this grand experiment that's happening. And a lot of that is good, and some of it is bad. But my biggest concern is the amount of space that we have to interact with each other in person is changing. And I very much worry about loneliness. I worry most about young adults who might not be connected to a larger community, who have come out of school and they're struggling and they don't know what to do. And there aren't a lot of community and eyes around them. And families might feel really lonely and isolated and ashamed, and they don't know what to do here. And of course, anxiety is going to be a big part of that. Of course, depression is going to be a big part of that. Of course, substance use is going to be a big part of that. It's a complicated problem, and it can feel very overwhelming. And the related question is, so what do I do? How do I help my child to start to build some community and connection? And that is an incredibly difficult question to answer. Sure, you can go on Reddit. Sure, you can join my YouTube channel, you can subscribe, we can comment there, but it's not like being in person, learning how to have eye contact, having that conversation, having that communication, and saying, I'm really struggling with this thing. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but what I am saying is anxiety is a natural result of not doing things and having had setbacks in areas. And I think for a lot of young people who feel disconnected, they're feeling a lot of anxiety. And it's really hard to start to make movement on that when there aren't a lot of places in person, IRL, to go to. That is the biggest change I've seen. I'm both excited about some of the directions we're going in, and I'm excited about how common this conversation is. I never imagined when I was in grad school that I could talk about my own anxiety and still have a job. That was the world I grew up in. Is you did not talk about this stuff. That world has changed, and that's fantastic. And I credit the internet and the communities that have emerged out of that as a big positive one here. But what I really fear is the people that are most connected and have the most resources. They're the ones that benefit the most from social media, from gaming, from all of these different connections. And the ones that are struggling, the ones that are more disconnected, they're the ones that are most vulnerable to the negative sides of all of this. No easy answers for that. But I think that's a good place for us to wrap up. And if you'd like to learn more, just go to goodatanxiety.com. You can, and if you want to give some feedback on this talk, go to goodatanxiety.com/feedback, and that'll give you a 3 short question survey, so I can improve this for the next community that I speak to. I'd really appreciate that. Thank you all for your time, and I wish you all the best.